Veterans, if you have been living with ringing, buzzing, humming, clicking, roaring, or other persistent noises in your ears since your military service, this message is for you, okay? Because the clock may be ticking. For several years, tinnitus has been one of the most commonly service connected conditions within the VA disability system. And that's not because it's easy and not because it's automatic, but because military service exposes countless veterans to dangerous noise conditions that most civilians will never experience. Flight lines, artillery, machine guns, mortars, tracked vehicles, engine rooms, combat operations, demolitions, the heavy equipment, the list goes on and on. And for many, many veterans, the ringing just never stopped. Now, here's the concern, okay? For several years, there have been discussions within the VA about how tinnitus is evaluated and compensated. Okay, the proposal that's been discussed recently currently would no longer treat tinnitus as a standalone compensable disability. Instead, tinnitus would be simply considered as a symptom of another condition rather than a separately rateable disability. So no final changes have been implemented, but there are several indicators that continue to suggest that several significant changes could be coming potentially as early as the end of 2026. And if that happens, the veterans who stand to lose the most are not the veterans who are already service connected for tinnitus. Let me say that again. This message is not primarily for veterans who already have a service connected tinnitus rating. Those veterans would likely not be expected to lose an existing service-connected condition simply because future regulations change. This message is for the veteran who suffers from tinnitus today, but has never filed or appealed, for the veteran who has put it off, for the veteran who assumes that they'll get around to it someday, the veteran who doesn't realize that the opportunity available today may not exist tomorrow. Because if tinnitus ultimately loses its status as a standalone rateable condition, the veterans most affected could be the tens of thousands who had a viable available path but never pursued it before the rules changed. And that's a big deal. For so many veterans, tinnitus represents far more than just a 10% evaluation. For lots of veterans, it's their first successful service-connected condition, their first acknowledgement from the VA that military service left lasting effects. It's their first foot in the door. And in some situations, establishing a service connection for tinnitus could become an important part of understanding other disabilities and conditions that could also warrant review. Once that door closes, future veterans could face a significantly steeper climb. One of the reasons tinnitus has historically been such an important condition is because it's largely subjective. There isn't a blood test to test for tinnitus. There isn't an MRI that confirms it. The veteran's own report of symptoms and onset is a significantly important piece of the evidence. Many veterans can remember exactly when it began. Maybe it was after a deployment. Maybe it was after a weapons qual. Maybe it was after years on a flight line. Could be after an explosion or a mortar attack or just working around heavy equipment. So many veterans can point to a specific period of military service and say that is when the ringing started. A simple personal statement discussing when the symptoms began, the military noise exposures that you experienced, and how those symptoms have persisted over time can often be extremely relevant supporting evidence for consideration. And when the VA can corroborate hazardous noise exposures that are associated with service, there may be a reasonable basis for service connection to be considered. Now, let's be clear, there are no guarantees. Not every claim is granted and not every veteran qualifies, but every claim is evaluated on its own evidence and circumstances. Here's what we do know. A veteran who never explores their options may never discover that they had a viable path available. A veteran who waits until after a major regulatory change may find that opportunities that existed yesterday no longer exist tomorrow. And a veteran who assumes that they have unlimited time may discover that the rules changed while they were waiting. And that's why I'm encouraging veterans to take this seriously. I don't want you to panic and I don't want you to rush. I do want you to get educated. I want you to learn how tinnitus is evaluated and understand the evidentiary requirements. Take your time to review your service history. Think about when your symptoms, the ringing in the ears, began. Understand your options while those options still exist. Because if these proposed changes become reality, so many veterans will look back and wish someone had sounded the alarm sooner. This is that alarm. Share this with your veteran friends. Share it with your family members. Share it with the veteran who says, I've had ringing in my ears since Iraq. Share it with the veteran who spent years on a flight line. Share it with the artilleryman. Share it with the infantryman, the tanker, the mechanic, the combat engineer, the crew chief, the veteran who spent years around dangerous noise conditions and simply accepted that the ringing is now part of their life. Okay. The window may not stay open forever. And if you believe that your military service caused lasting tinnitus or ringing in your ears, now is the time to become educated, understand your options, and determine whether pursuing a claim makes sense for your situation. Because opportunities delayed can become opportunities lost.